The fun question is best pickup line. So think of it now while I'm doing that. Guys, just think of it really quick while I'm doing
I don't think I have. Wow.
Can you guys please tell us your name, your year, your major, where you're from, and briefly tell us what you're involved in on campus?
For sure. So I'm Yoav. I'm a sophomore studying political economy here. My hometown is Lawrence, Kansas. And here at USC, I'm a senator for our student government. I'm the founder of Children's Give Back and the current vice president of the Men's Mental Health Initiative.
How you guys doing? My name is Donald. I am a senior studying political science with a minor in juvenile justice. I'm from Los Angeles, California, and I am also president of Brothers Breaking Bread, as well as a member of Alpha Alpha Fraternity Incorporated.
Hi, my name is Vincent Demonte. I'm a sophomore studying journalism with a minor in comedy. I'm from Fullerton, California in Orange County, and I'm involved in sketch comedy here with the Suspenders, as well as a number of things with Annabird Media.
What is masculinity to you?
Wow. I think for me, masculinity is such a subjective term that has, meaning from just whatever time period you're from. I think before I describe what masculinity is, I want to talk about how we contrast it to other things like what femininity is and all. And when you really start listing traits from both, it can be, really given to both masculinity and femininity, strong, protective, caring, right? That's what I would describe as masculinity, but it's also the very same as such. So I think it's just whatever value system you hold and whatever you aspire to be is what can be considered masculinity.
I think there's an aspect of chivalry isn't dead type thing, of, just being respectful to people and just kind of overall just being a good person. But I think, again, also those values of how you grew up as a kid, who you surround yourself with, also kind of goes into your overall picture of, I guess, your own personal definition of masculinity.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think it's interesting, though, because usually when you're asked this question, it's how do you feel about toxic masculinity? I think very rarely we're actually asked about, masculinity itself. And I agree with what you guys have said. It is very subjective. I think with toxic masculinity, I think there is more of a defined kind of set of traits that people look at. Whether that's not being in touch with your feelings, always having to, never being vulnerable, kind of. But with just masculinity, I agree. It's much more subjective. It's much more about where you grew up. It's much more open for interpretation.
No, absolutely. I will say that, again, based off of who you are, where you grew up from, as a black man growing in Los Angeles, masculinity always has a tie with some type of violence, right? Whether or not you're violent enough to protect somebody, violent enough to give retribution based off of disrespect, it's very much a role that is isolated in your ability to do harm and receive harm from others too. So I think that's one of the really main traits of the one area that masculinity stays into, because when it comes to sexuality, right, you can be a gay man and masculine as well, right? It's people don't really necessarily have a problem with that. But when it comes to violence, being non-violent, then it's the issue of masculinity then is transferred if you choose not to be, in touch with that.
Yeah, no, for sure. I think too, in my own personal experience, where I grew up, my part of Orange County is very split kind of politically, and as a result of that, really socially too. A lot of the time people have that really traditional view of what it means to be masculine, bottle up those emotions, kind of stick with, the usual, rough man doing all the hard work, standing up for what you believe in kind of in a more, I guess, toxic masculinity way. And then you have people kind of on the other side there who are be open with how you feel with people. Don't keep that bottled in because that's never a good thing to begin with. And then just kind of, being true to yourself, and knowing that like, you know, you don't have to fall into this societal definition of what masculinity is.
Is this normal for you guys to be talking to a group of other men about emotions and masculinity and things like that? Like, is this typical?
I'd say it's normal for me just for the last 2 weeks. So we've had our club meetings for the men's health initiative, but not like outside of that. You know, obviously I grew up like in the Midwest, and like you don't really have mental health in the Midwest, to be honest. Like, but it's funny because like, you know, you have that, but then at home, like my dad is a social psychologist.
Okay.
So like mental health definitely existed at my house, you know. So that kind of juxtaposition, you know, of having, you know, I played like a lot of sports. I ran track, you know, did soccer, and like in that I feel like a lot of the time you're told to like man up, you know, when you're hurt or when you're just kind of not feeling it, you know. But then I would go home and my dad would be like, you know, like if you're feeling something, like let me know, you know, because he studies that stuff. But yeah, so I'd say it's normal for me at home, but definitely less so like in public.
No, absolutely. I will say like recently, like with like the trend of just, I don't know, whatever is like how we perceive mental health is a lot positive than it has been for like the last few years, right? Like for one, going to therapy is like a good thing, you know? And it's like people aren't like, I remember growing up and people was like, oh, a shrink? I'm not gonna go there. Like what? That's absolutely not, right? But now it's like, oh yeah, I had therapy on Thursdays, you know, like it's like a haircut, you know, and I definitely like appreciate that, you know, in terms of like interacting with like, you know, my friends and all that. I mean, like I said, I'm in a frat, Alpha Phi Fraternity Incorporated, you know, and with us as like frat bros, we're very open with like, hey man, I love you. You know that, right? Hey, you good, right? Like there's like definitely this stereotype of like black man, strong, whatever. We're over here sitting down. So what's your coping mechanisms, man? Like, what are you doing to relax, like, aside from just everything? So I definitely think that as men, you know, and maybe just I might be in a vacuum of just emotionally available dudes, which I'm cool with, you know, all my friends being like that. But I definitely would like to think that as men, we are very much opening up.
Yeah, no, I couldn't, you know, agree more with that. I think so far throughout the stages of my life, I've been lucky to have people who are, you know, telling me it's really good to be kind of open with your emotions. My dad's an emotional guy, and so he is always, you know, there sharing his emotions with us. I'd say just in general, my family's very emotional. And so we're always talking about how we feel, whether that's an impassioned argument or like just talking about, you know, what's making us upset. I'm also really lucky with my friends at home. And I think also what really helps is being a part of comedy. Because comedy, in my experience now and kind of watching it, is just comedy is a form of therapy. And just kind of being able to express how you feel in a funny way, kind of make light of what happened.
No, that's
Vincent,
good.
do you ever feel like you use comedy as a coping mechanism?
What is this, therapy?
No,
Yes.
for sure. Definitely. I definitely think now being on a comedy troupe, because I never really did comedy in high school growing up. Like I had a super found appreciation for it. But I think having an outlet to do comedy just makes it so much better. And I think kind of the realm of college kind of opened up like an outlet to express things that like been a problem for me throughout high school. All my friends had gotten into relationships. Like pretty much I was the only single person. Everyone else was coupled up at all times. And so for the longest time during high school, it was that constant battle of like putting my self-worth is not tied down to being in a relationship, because that's, you don't need a relationship to be happy. That, you know, you can find happiness in yourself. And I think that was kind of my driving kind of issue in high school, because that just kind of built kind of the lower self-esteem, things like that. But then coming into college and having like this comedy outlet, like one of the first things I did was like write a sketch about third wheeling. I think it definitely helped me a lot.
I think that's like comedy was like us as men's our first route of like therapy, right? Like, man, I cry myself to sleep every night, man, you know?
You too?
I'm so unhappy at home, man, you know? Like, that was just like the way that like, you know, you were really able to communicate like, something wrong, but hey, you know, we ball, right?
Yeah.
So, I don't know, I definitely like, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I agree too with what you're saying, like, especially with college being a place to kind of like try new things, you know. I don't know, like freshman year I took like a ballroom dance class, you know, like, and I would never do something like that in high school, you know, but I think that also kind of manifests itself in like the mental health space, you know, like I think with you like trying all these new things, all that, I think that can be like a very powerful like motivator for people to like open up, you know, especially when you're kind of like, college is busy, you know, like you're doing stuff all the time, and it can get like overwhelming, you know, but to know like there are a lot of people going through the same things that you are, I think it's like it can definitely help you improve like your mental health and like the mental health of the people you're talking to. I had 3 other roommates last year, and now they're all in relationships, and I'm the only one who's not. But like you're right, like I think knowing that your self-worth can't come from other people, you know, like your self-worth has to be like from yourself. You know, you have to be proud, like self-love, right? Like if you're not gonna love yourself, like who will? You know
Absolutely.
Yeah. That's my mantra for sure. And it definitely took me a while to hit that point. I always said that during high school was like the time to kind of reflect on that. COVID definitely didn't help with that either. And kind of with that kind of post-COVID, like depression, kind of anxiety that came from that. Coupled with that was not a happy combo for sure. But I definitely think that, you know, coming to college and finally having that kind of like self-realization, like, oh my God, I don't need to be tied down like to this one kind of stereotype that like I need to be in a relationship to be happy, really helps me. And then also just surrounding yourself with people who are like, they'll support you no matter what. Like whether or not you're in one or not, they don't care. Like, you know, they're just glad to be around with you.
What role does masculinity play in your romantic relationships with women?
Well, to start off, I don't think my sample size is big enough, so I don't have enough determination on that one.
You're handsome.
Thank you. Thank you. But yeah, I mean, I had one relationship during COVID that lasted a solid month there.
COVID, that's a
That's a lot.
That's a long. That's 24
crazy.
hours right there, man.
Yeah, exactly, dude. Oh my God. I definitely have this kind of like mental block is what I call it when it comes to like, you know, walking up to a girl and maybe like asking her for a number or something. There's just like this little voice in my head that's like, oh, don't you fucking do it. Don't you do it. Don't you dare do it. Kind of like trying to reel me in. I think that partially is kind of a result of, I guess, finally coming to terms with being single, but I think also having an anxiety of like, you know, relationships is the thing that got you into this like emotional turmoil. Like, why would you get into it yourself, which is crazy. I see it a lot on the internet and like TikTok and Instagram and things, but like, you know, girls having this set perception of like their ideal man, of like him being 6 foot tall, curly hair, you know, strong, able to protect them, things like that. And then, you know, looking at myself in the mirror being like, dude, you're 5'5" and a half, black straight hair right here. Like, you're not necessarily filling in the stereotype that people online are like. And so I think a lot of it stems from fear of like not filling that role per se. And I think my height is definitely one of my biggest insecurities, I would definitely say. And so I think that kind of voice in my head is also in conjunction with that whole kind of insecurity in being like, you know, you don't want to walk up to a girl and or DM a girl or someone and the question of, how tall are you again, pops up? Because then, like, you know, it's like my brain's response being like, yeah, we don't want you to get hurt on this one. So, like, let's reel it in real quick. Yeah.
That's really interesting to hear, right?
Yeah.
I wouldn't even say, like, on the other side of the spectrum, right? But I'm a taller guy, right? Black, if you couldn't tell, right? And there's this perception, right? And this is just, not even just in dating, but just overall of, like, this is a very tall, big black guy, right? So there's certain ways he's gonna act, right? He's gonna be super masculine, super aggressive, right? Not gonna wanna talk about his feelings, right? Nonchalant, right? And then it's like, when it's the opposite, right? I'm over here like, well, let's talk about this. Let's talk about it. Well, let's be very direct, right? It's a very like, whoa, thrown off, right? So I definitely think that when approaching a relationship that we're very much confronting with like, what the reality is versus what the perception is, right? And then trying to translate, you know, where those two meet. But yeah, no.
Totally.
Yeah. No, I agree. Like, you kind of said like that pressure of like having to make the first move, you know, like having to walk up to someone to ask for their number. Like, I feel like that is something that like it's like something you got to practice, you know, as well. Like, I mean, personally, I don't think I would still like ever DM someone that's just like on Instagram, like out of nowhere. It seems a bit, I don't know,
It goes
it's just
down in
weird.
the DMs.
What?
It goes down in the DMs.
Yeah, I bet. I wouldn't know. But like, I feel like for me at least, like in person is a bit easier. Just like talking to people, you know. I mean, it's interesting. Like for me in high school, like my friend group was like all dudes, you know. It was just like 6 dudes. And so like, and then with COVID, like we just like, you know, you don't see girls even for like a while, like, which is like, and then obviously I came to USC and like completely different, you know. But I think in terms of like the role that masculinity plays in that as well, like I think that the way that we interact obviously with guys and you interact with girls is very different. You know, I like a lot of the time, we talked about like how you open up to your friends. Like a lot of the time we as dudes, I feel like our default is to be like, hey, like you see the Lakers game last night? You know, like
right.
Not to really dive into that, like how are you doing? You know, like stuff like that. It's just kind of like this surface, like chit chat, you know, like, I don't know. And I maybe that is part of just like societal expectations, you know, of like, that's what we're supposed to talk about. Like, wow, great weather outside today, guys. Like, but that's just kind of how it is for us, you know?
It's funny because to hear you talk about that, right? And I'm thinking about the way that we talk to each other, but then the way that we talk to women is so completely different, right? Like, I would say I'm being very genuine with you guys right here, right? Very open, right? And there's not really like a boundary that I'm like, oh man, what are they gonna judge me to say that I like to, you know, talk about my feelings, right? But then when it comes to talking to women, right, it's a very different attitude, right? Conversation that I had with close friends of mine who are by no means, you know, any type of like just off. Like they're very general people who are like, look, you don't talk to your girl about your feelings, right? Never let your partner see when you down bad, right? You can open up small things about it, right? But like when you are feeling insecure, you never show that to your girl. And I'm like, that's crazy, you know? Like, especially this is like a partner that you have and someone that you are actually like, you know, supposed, like if they can't know when you feel insecure about something, that's a big gap in a hole in just communication in general. So I think that like when it comes to masculinity having an approach or an effect on how we approach relationships and then how we get into them, it just shows like we're damn near two different people when that happens, right? Like, I don't know, it's a very big, you just don't talk to your partner or girls in general about how, you know, you made the same with your homies, you know?
Yeah, no. And as kind of like the scribe of my friend group, writing down the do's and don'ts of like relationships, watching from the outside, you know, I learned from them pretty easily that, you know, communicating is just key. Whether that's, you know, your emotions or overall, you can't just like keep those things hidden, because if you can't talk about like, you know, just what's making you upset, then, you know, in the grand scheme of things, what's stopping you from holding out like key information or something like that? Every relationship isn't perfect. You're gonna have your highs, your lows, and it's important to work those out with people instead of just living in like a fantasy world that every day is just perfect and that, you know, every person is just a perfect human being. Because, you know, we all have flaws, we all have imperfections, and it's, you know, it's our job to just kind of work them through together.
When you are like in a relationship, you know, I feel like that person should also be like, not just like, you know, like your girlfriend, but like your best friend, right? Like, so there shouldn't be a difference between you like opening it up to like, you know, your homies or like the person who's in your relationship. Like being in a relationship is at the end of the day about being vulnerable, right? So there's no reason like you shouldn't be vulnerable with the person that you spend like a ton of time with. Like I said, it shouldn't just be your girlfriend, it should be your best friend. If that's the case, then there should be no problem with sharing like everything you feel. Like if you can't really open up to that person, like they don't see like the real you, right? They're not dating who you really are then, if you're not like completely open.
Do you think that women understand like the way that the societal pressure of masculinity affects men?
I don't really think so. I feel like a lot of girls kind of like feel kind of like are confused by the relationships that guys have with each other sometimes, and to the point where they're like, what do they even talk about? Like when they hang out, what are they doing? And I think for them, I don't know if opening up to each other and like expressing how they're feeling like comes off.
I would definitely disagree on the way that I think women definitely understand the effect of it and what's going on. I think because they haven't seen a lot of examples of any deviation from that, that's just the norm, you know, where it's like, yeah, they don't open up to each other, but that's just how they are, you know? Boys will be boys, right? And so I think that they fully understand what it does, the damage that it does, how it may matriculate into their own relationship, into their partner's, you know, actions and all, but that's just the genuine norm, right? And so, and even when we do break out of it, there's an issue, at least with me, where I've personally seen, where it's, now what? Because I've only seen guys who don't talk about their feelings, who aren't communicative, and who aren't expressive. So now that I do see someone like that, I ain't never seen this before. What's going on? So yeah, that was what I would say about that.
No, totally agree with that.
Yeah. No, I would agree. Like, as well, when I was talking to my friends about like starting or like working with Sam to start this like men's mental health initiative, people were like, yeah, but like, you know why men feel like that? It's like the patriarchy that you guys set up. And like, they're right. Like, I'm not going to say they're not right. But like, it's true. Like, we kind of set up, I say we, like, the men that came before us.
It was
us three, yeah. No, like we set up the system in a way that like, we shouldn't talk about our feelings. We shouldn't like, and that's in part because we set up the system not just for ourselves, but also for women. Right? Like the roles that men created in our society were kind of prone to that, you know? So I think, I agree. I think women do understand like the pressure. Obviously they're not men, so they're not like experiencing it themselves. But I think a lot of the time they do understand part of like the pressure in it. You know, I think it's just very different. Like kind of like we were talking about how like women will be like very close to their friends. You know, they'll like talk about, you know, the smallest things and like, you know, do guys talk about those same things with their friends? For me, at least, like, I definitely open up, like, really close to my friends, and also to my friends that are women. Like, I feel like we're, like, super tight. Like, I just came from brunch with, like, a friend of mine, and, like, we don't, like, hide anything, I feel like, you know? Like, when we're insecure, like, we open up. So I feel like the fact, like, we don't need to separate it, you know? I think men, women, like, we're going through a lot of the same things. Like, obviously, there are different societal expectations, but like we can feel like empowered to open up to each other.
I like that you said societal expectations. Once again, leading into my next question.
I read the script.
So some men feel like they always have to be tough or pretend like they're okay even when they're not, because like that's just what's expected of them. So for you guys, do you feel pressure from family, friends, partners, women, or society in general to just act a certain way?
Definitely. My dad, ex-army, ex-paratrooper, right? So, you know, you got this very much a bravado of, hey, listen, there are just things that a man does, right? And I would definitely not say it wasn't in a toxic way, you know, consciously, right? It was just, and it wasn't even in the way that you act towards people, it was the way that you receive things, right? So it's like happy wife, happy life, right? So that disregards the, and I know y'all heard that before too.
Yeah,
it definitely, I mean, you hear that over and over again, right? So it's like how that matriculates in my relationship, where it's like, it don't matter how I feel. If old girl feel good, then I'm doing a great job, right? Totally neglecting whatever my needs may be, right? Or it would be like, hey, look, as a man, you know, you guys got to make sure that your responsibilities are handled, and then you can tend to yourself, right? And so it's like not even him consciously knowing that him, not because I wouldn't even say, going back to the whole patriarchy thing, I wouldn't even say that it's like there are conscious men who are sitting here like, yo, that is wrong, and yada, yada, yada. It's this generational curse that rolls over, right? Where he's not even conscious of that, right? So it's like us grabbing those and like stopping it right there, right? And yeah, I mean, just being a man and like having, you know, men in your life, right? You see them as strong, tough individuals, and at least for me personally, that is involved with like being able to receive, you know, all the craziness of the world and not showing a response, you know? So
yeah, definitely. There's like there's like this experiment that I like where they had 10 monkeys in like this cage, right? And then there was a ladder, and they would climb to the top, and there was a banana at the top of the ladder. And when one of the monkeys would climb up, I think they would like spray all the other monkeys with water, like, and they would get annoyed. And so they learned to like beat up the monkey that like went up.
Jesus.
And so eventually none of them went up. But then one by one they would like replace the monkeys. And then so they replaced one monkey, and this monkey like goes up the ladder, and then they beat him up. Right? So they stopped going up the ladder, and then they replaced them, and eventually you have 10 monkeys who weren't in the original, right? And none of them go up the ladder, even though they don't, and like they take out the punishment, right? So you don't even have a punishment anymore, but they still don't go up the ladder, right? It's like
imagine being the one that just walked in like, yo, what y'all doing for?
And like it worked the same with us, you know, like in society, you know, we kind of have a lot of these norms, a lot of these traditions, and we might not even know like why they were set up that way, but we still keep like enforcing them, you know. And like I touched upon kind of like earlier with like sports, you know, like I was a hurdler in high school, and like as a hurdler, like that stuff is so bad for your hips, like terrible for your hips. Like I would have to pop like 4 ibuprofens like just to run, you know, like just to do my races, but it was like expected, you know, like you're gonna run, like unless you have like something super severe, like you're gonna be out there competing for your school, you know, like that's just how it's always been.
Like I said earlier, my dad is an emotional guy, and he's, you know, he's one to just, you know, call me and be like, hey, love you, like, you know, you're the best.
Love that.
But I definitely learned a lot from him. I think a lot of how I feel about kind of the overall arching theme of masculinity and about kind of like societal pressure, I kind of learned from him, because I think for him too, he himself was kind of battling stereotypes himself. He was a nurse here at USC actually, and you know, most of the time the stereotype of like a nurse is a woman nurse, and my dad just kind of bashing that down, being like, nope, you know, men can be nurses too and be completely, you know, as capable of doing that as anyone else can. And I know he's definitely been open about kind of like, people were always kind of like, man, a male nurse, man, I've never heard of that before, like joking around with it. And he's been like, yeah, you know, I just want to help people and kind of, you know, save people's lives, and so that's why I want to do it. Just that whole process too has been helpful in me kind of determining my own path and definition of masculinity for me.
What do you think about the phrase "the man in the relationship"?
I definitely, the man in the relationship is such a loaded statement, right? Because it's like, it's used by both sides, right? And it's like, or who wears the pants in the relationship, right? That's another one, right? And it definitely shows this like role of like domination, right? Of who's in charge, who's controlling what, right? And so if you find yourself in a relationship, right, where you know that like, oh, I'm not going to, like I'll work on personal anecdote, right? I've never been the type of dude where it was like, oh, you gonna wear that outside? You know, we'll change that up, right? Or I don't know what else. Like that's just insane to me, right? Yeah. But then it's like, it's perceived like, oh, so you just gonna let me do whatever, right? Oh, I guess I'm the man in the relationship, and it's like, you know, it's adding these dated, you know, very toxic, very destructive relationship habits from the 50s. If we're able to understand that like gender, sexuality works in a spectrum, right? Even in heterosexual relationships, why can't we see how we act, you know, in that relationship as a spectrum too? Maybe I'm not trying to be the dude that's like, oh, you gonna wear that outside? Like, because that's just not how brothers was raised, you know? So I think that like by assigning those roles, it does the damage of, you know, placing that toxic masculinity in the relationship even when it wasn't even there, you know?
Yeah. No, and I agree. I mean, I wouldn't know about man. I mean, this is boy talk, not man talk. So
oh yeah,
I wouldn't know about it. But definitely, I feel like, especially it came, like you're saying, like from the 50s. I feel like it came a lot of it from like income, you know, like wages, and like men were making. I mean, obviously there's still a gender pay gap, but kind of almost that concept of not just being dependent like from an income perspective, but dependent in other senses, like, you know, like going out with clothes. Like you know, I think in a good relationship, like, you're both like independent people, you know, like you should both be able to stand on your own, like, you know, like you should support each other for sure, but like you're not like there shouldn't be a relationship where somebody like can't survive without the other person, you know, like I think that's the great thing about what should be modern society is that like men and women can each like survive, they can do everything, you know. Personally, I wear a lot of shorts, not a lot of pants. I'm sure a lot of women wear a lot more pants than I do.
Shame. No, like what?
No, but like that's like we shouldn't be beholden to these like bygone stereotypes, like, you know, who wears the pants in the relationship, you know, the man in the relationship.
Yeah,
I agree. Like it shouldn't mean that.
Yeah,
know?
Exactly. Or the shorts in the relationship.
Yeah,
the shorts in the relationship?
Yeah. But I you know, I completely agree with what, you know, both of you had said for sure. You know, I'm not going to be like, you know, big brothering my future girlfriend and like full on control. Like exactly. Like we're both individuals. We can do what we want. I'm not going to be that type of controlling type of person. I think also too, and this is like the only thing that I kind of agree with the whole like, you know, the pants in the relationship, and it's not even that stereotype too. It's just treating your partner with respect, like you know, being a respectful human being and not being a complete, you know, dick to them. Like that's kind of just a golden rule of, you know, treat others the way you should be treated. You know, if you like this person, like, you know, pay for dinner once in a while. You know, bring her flowers or something. Like, sure, that's part of, you know, the, I guess, societal pressure of things we have to do, but also at the same time, like, you know, you want to tell your partner that you love them and that you respect them as a human being.
Yeah, I think it just comes from acting in love. Like, no games, no, you know, requirements. It's like, you love somebody, you act that way, right? And just keep it at that, right? I think by us putting these rubrics, right, is where we find ourselves in, you know, issues. And that's on so many facets, right? Relationships, families, etc. So, you know.
Yeah.
I'm gonna wear the shorts and the pants,
Yeah.
and I'm gonna act in love.
Yeah, exactly.
And you know, and that's just how it's gonna be, and it's like it's dumb.
Yeah, it's like kind of
totally
funny too though, like, cause like obviously back when the saying was made, like probably like men did wear pants, but I feel like today like pants are probably like the least
You really on
gendered
this pants part?
piece.
All right. Thank you guys so much for participating and being open and genuine during this Boy Talk with C Magazine. I really appreciate how serious you all took this, but let's end on a light note. What is everyone's best pickup line?
Oh dang, my phone must be broken. It don't have your number in it.
Are you
So
Tennessee? Because you're the only Tennessee.
What?
That was
Do I know you?
Yeah, exactly.
Cause I should.
because I should.
Untapped Riz.
C Magazine issue number 3 is out now.
Okay.
I was on Boy Talk, so
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.